Thanks for joining us for today's Bookmarked. My name's Jessica. I'm with the Chelmsford Library, and this is my colleague Deanna. She's also with the Chelmsford Library, and we like to recommend new books. So today we're bringing you some fresh summer fiction. Also coming up this summer, look out for it. It's not out yet, but it'll be out soon. Our summer reading challenge. So you'll want to do that to earn some prizes, raffle tickets, and some prizes. And yeah, we'll have that all figured out hopefully in the next month or so. Also, the pop-up library is going around town. You're going to want to track the pop-up library down because none of the books on the pop-up are requestable, and often you can find those books that have like 100, 200 holds on them if you can find it around town. So our schedule is online at chelmsfordlibrary.org, and we go to places like the Senior Center, we go to Varney Park, we go to Friendship Park, we go all over the place. So yeah, so check it out.
Check it out.
So why don't we get started with some new books? What'd you bring today?
So I brought some great books today, all I think very suitable for summer reading. The first one is called The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill. And so obviously I read the book because of the title, The Woman in the Library. However, I'm very glad to report that it was actually also a very good mystery. The setup is very intriguing. It's kind of a story within a story. An Australian mystery writer named Hannah is writing a murder mystery set at the Boston Public Library. And one of her characters, Freddie, is an Australian mystery writer who is in Boston on a writing fellowship. So Freddie is in the BPL and she's in the reading room, and instead of writing her book, she's kind of people watching and making up stories in her head about the people in the room. And then just out of nowhere, there's this like loud, terrified scream. And everything kind of stops and they're told to stay in place. And so she starts talking to her table mates, and they kind of bond over this experience, right? So they kind of start this friendship. Freddie, Kane, Wit, and Marigold are the four characters. So as it goes on, it turns out, right, that they all have secrets and that maybe one, if not more than one of them, had a connection to the woman who was killed in the library. And interspersed with this story is letters that are written to Hannah from somebody named Leo, and he appears to be like a fellow writer kind of giving her advice from afar because she's writing in Australia during COVID, so she can't come to Boston to do her research, so he's kind of doing that for her. So I thought kind of this integration was really well done. It kind of put you back in the moment, like kind of explaining why she's not putting COVID in her novel and stuff like that. But then also reminding you that this is a story within a story. Very well integrated. The premise and the mystery is very good. And I enjoyed all the local references, especially the references to Boston Public Library. So if you like that kind of concept, the story within a story, if you liked, say, 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson or Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz, I think this would be a great choice for summer reading. The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill.
I did like that 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. We both really like him. So, as you can see, I've been outside enjoying some great summer fiction, so I just wanted to acknowledge that for everybody. But my first book is, I was really excited to come across this one and to receive a copy in advance. It's coming out in September, actually, so it's not quite a summer book, but still, you can look forward to it. It's still nice around here in September. And it's Less is Lost by Andrew Sean Greer. And it's actually the sequel to Less, which was a 2018 Pulitzer Prize winner. Really funny, sharp, witty book. I loved it a lot. And if you haven't read Less, go and do that. You can do that this summer and then find this one in September. It's a wonderful, humorous romp across all kinds of international destinations through the experience of an author named Arthur Less. And he's sort of down and out. He's not really feeling great about himself. Even though everyone around him thinks he's brilliant, he's not feeling great about it. He's kind of lost. So he agrees to go on this tour. It's kind of like a book tour that's going to end up in an inspirational place where he's supposed to be working on his next novel. And that's the one that features in Less is Lost. So in Less is Lost, he's actually achieved some stability, and he's got a kind of a stable relationship, a stable career. He's well known, he's well liked, but he still feels like something's missing. So he grows a mustache and decides to go on a U.S. tour. And he picks all these different destinations going across the country. all forms of transportation, the slower the better, so that he can really kind of get to know. He feels like he's missing a piece of America, and I just thought it was like it's a breath of fresh air. It was a really great, again, sharp, witty, very funny, and a really good book for, like a really good antidote to our divided times. It's like getting back to your roots, or getting back to, like, sitting next to somebody in a bar or something like that, just chatting. So I thought it was really good. So look for that in September. That's Less is Lost by Andrew Sean Greer.
Yeah, so you've told me about Less before, and so now I'm definitely going to have to read that this summer so I can read the sequel, because now when you were like, oh, he grew a mustache and then went on a trip, I was like, well, the growing the mustache thing, like, that's a great detail. I got to check this out.
It is an important detail. It is. Mm-hmm.
So my next book is The Catch by Alison Fairbrother. So Ellie Adler is a young 20-something in DC. She is a kind of a rising journalist at a startup online news rag, and she's got kind of a good but complicated life. Her boyfriend is married, her family is crazy, and she's very close to her father, James. But James is on his third marriage. She has 3 half-siblings, and they regularly kind of have to gather, like, off-season. So, for example, they do things like summer Thanksgiving, right? So, being the oldest, Ellie feels like she's always been the closest to her father, but when he dies unexpectedly, that just kind of derails her life. So, at the reading of the will, Ellie is expecting that he's going to leave her kind of his most prized possession, which is this baseball that has meaning to both of them. But instead, he leaves her kind of a seemingly meaningless gift of a novelty tie rack, and the baseball goes to somebody that nobody in the family even knows who it is. And she's kind of grieving and outraged, and so she takes the baseball and she's like, I'm going to find this person, I'm going to find out what they meant to my father. So along the way, she learns a lot more about her father than she expected that she would, and she's going to kind of have to come to terms with the man that she thought he was and the man that he actually was. So it's a story about family, it's a story about navigating grief, and what it means to kind of know and love someone, flaws and all. So I think if you liked books like The Unsinkable Greta James or One Italian Summer, if you like books just about family relationships, I think this is a good one. The Catch by Alison Fairbrother.
Great. So my next one, I brought Counterfeit by Kirstin Chen, and I really hadn't, and before I came across this one, I really didn't know anything about it, and I started reading it, and I thought, oh, this is really fascinating. So the premise is 2 Chinese American Stanford grads take on the super fake luxury bag industry for a Chinese mob boss. And it's like Crazy Rich Asians meets Double Indemnity. We first meet Ava. Ava's a Stanford grad corporate lawyer, dissatisfied corporate lawyer, and a mom to 2-year-old Henri. She's living in San Francisco with her husband, rising surgeon Ollie, and is equally bored and stressed out of her mind. Her son is too much for her, and she wishes she weren't alone every day. So then enter Winnie, who is an estranged classmate of hers who actually ended up dropping out of Stanford, so they lost touch. And Winnie has a proposition for her. Winnie is involved in this super luxury fake business. So basically what they do is they walk into like Chanel or Longchamp or Louis Vuitton, buy a real bag, walk out with it, switch it with the super fake, which is made in a black factory in China, and they take that fake back to the store, as if like they're dissatisfied with the product, it just wasn't the right fit or something like that. The store accepts it back, then they take the real one and they sell it at a discount on eBay and reap the profits. So it's really fascinating, and all of the brands going through, when you're reading about the different brands or the different, they also talk about designer clothing, designer shoes. I found myself guilty pleasure Googling like all of these things, like what's so special about this bag? But the way that they describe how it feels to be carrying around these like luxury items, how transformative they can be, you can see why this would be a very profitable scheme. So anyway, Winnie brings this business plan to Ava to see if Ava would be interested in it. But Ava at first is disgusted, skeptical and disgusted by this whole plan, and she wants nothing to do with it. That is until she ends up going in a major disagreement with her husband, Ollie, goes on a trip to visit her family in China with her son, and Ollie freezes all her assets. So she has no money. She's completely left alone until she agrees to whatever the disagreement was. Then Winnie's plan obviously looks a lot more attractive now, right? So she says, okay, I'll do this one task for you in return for whatever my share of the payment. And it's to like collect this 100 super fake items and bring them back to San Francisco. And so she does that, and it's fine. But then she kind of like, oh, this wasn't so bad, a kind of a thrill out of it. Anyway, the whole book is told as a confessional, so we know that they've been caught. But we don't know the whole story from there. We don't know, is Winnie's account, because you get both sides, is Winnie's account the honest way, how it actually transpired, or is Ava's account the way it actually transpires? Or are either of them giving a false account in order to get away with the crime? So anyway, it's a really fascinating kind of inside look into this this black market, and it also contains really interesting details about the problems of fast and luxury fashion, as well as the pitfalls of global labor and how demand in the U.S. or the Western world creates all these crazy problems overseas. So it was really interesting. Mm-hmm.
No, it sounds good. I like the idea of, I like those unreliable narrators, and it sounds like maybe this one has even 2 unreliable narrators. So I like that. My next book is Ashton Hall by Lauren Belfer. So as this novel opens, Hannah Larson and her young son Nicky arrive at Ashton Hall. It's a historic English country manor house where her ailing uncle Christopher rents rooms. So he leaves almost immediately upon her arrival. He's heading to the United States for some experimental treatment for his disease. And at loose ends, Hannah, who was a scholar, she was working on her PhD before she became a mom, she starts volunteering for like historic research for the house, and her young son Nicky, who is kind of left on his own, bored kid, he starts exploring, and he finds kind of this long closed up part of the house, and in that is a skeleton in a room that's been bricked off. And so, all the authorities are called in, but it turns out that the skeleton, which turns out to be female, dates to the time of the Tudors. And so it's not a mystery for the police, it's a mystery for the historians. And so Hannah is working with, the people in the house to like try and figure out like who this woman is. And as she learns more about her, like she starts kind of seeing like parallels to her own life, where she's got this unfinished dissertation, she's got a neurodiverse child, she's got a rocky marriage, and she's thinking about like kind of her role like in all of this as a woman. And so I was originally drawn to the title because I thought it was a Gothic, Ashton Hall, like there's like a manor house and a skeleton and a mystery, but really it's more of a contemporary story about the role of women, the role of women in society, in the home, and as mothers, and how that's changed, from the time of the Tudors, and how some things haven't changed. So if you liked books like historic fiction, if you like books like The Matrix by Lauren Groff or Circe by Madeline Miller, I think this is the same themes, just kind of in a lighter, more contemporary form. So that's Ashton Hall by Lauren Belfer.
Yeah, the pressures of motherhood played a big role in Counterfeit as well. I forgot to mention that, and then you mentioned Gothic, so that leads me to my next book, which is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. Every review starts off with the same thing. It's Rebecca meets Mexican Gothic. I would argue that it's more of the Rebecca than the Mexican Gothic. It's very creepy. And I think we talked about the house as a trope in Gothic horror before with We've Always Lived in the Castle and The Turn of the Screw, and Rebecca, obviously, as well. So here we have a young woman named Beatriz who, in post-Civil War Mexico, witnesses the murder and destruction of her family and home. She's taken in, albeit reluctantly, by nearby relatives, but ultimately springs at the chance to marry the handsome Don Rodolfo Solorzano, ignoring the tales about his first wife's demise, of course. She moves into the house only to watch Solorzano escape to his political duties in Mexico City, leaving her alone. Of course, everyone else in the house, the sister, the maids, everyone gaslights her and feeds her fear of the house and being alone, talking about certain areas of the house that she must avoid, she must never go there. And ultimately, she reaches out to a local priest. And one of the surprising elements that the author brings to the novel, and this kind of brings in like an exorcist omen kind of part of it, is she sort of mixes what happens with Catholicism, right? They incorporate a lot of the pre-Christian idols and holidays and festivals and things into Catholicism, maybe to make it like easier to convince the masses that this is what they should follow. But the priest is actually practicing witchcraft. So in order to, remove whatever spirits are there. So he's a Catholic priest, but he's using these ancient rituals. So I thought that was an interesting thing that she did there. So, but it's very good, and I highly recommend it. And that's the Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, and I believe it just came out.
Yeah, that is on my TBR list. Because I really liked Mexican Gothic, so
yeah,
I think, and I liked Rebecca. So
it's a fascinating part of history too.
Yeah, so exactly.
She does a good job.
So my next book is The Handler by M.P. Woodward. So this is a spy thriller, perfect for summer reading. And I always like a good spy thriller at this time of year because I'm eagerly awaiting the next Daniel Silva. So I need something to kind of, hold me over until then. So this was definitely filled the void. So we open with Meredith Morris Dale. She's on her way home from a mission that has gone sideways. And she thinks that when she gets back to the home base, she's going to, be in a lot of trouble. But instead, they have a new assignment for her. She has to bring her disgraced ex-husband, John, back into the spy business. So it seems that there's been this long-running mission for many years where they have a mole inside an Iranian nuclear facility. And so he's been feeding them information for years, and he's also preventing the Iranians from achieving full nuclear power. So that's very important. But now this spy, for various reasons, which you learn, wants out. And so, but he will only talk to John because John was his original handler, and he's the only one that he trusts. So Meredith flies out to the West Coast, to visit John, and tries to convince him to come out of retirement. But of course, he's like, no way, I'm not interested. She leaves, and like within a day or two, like he has been attacked. They don't know why, but clearly like somebody already knows that something's up, with this mission. And so John feels like he has no choice because now he's worried about the life of his asset. And he's like, all right, this one mission, I will come back and I will do it. So he agrees to help. So this spy thriller, I think, really has it all. Like there's high stakes, nuclear power, there's international locations, there's Iranian spies, Russian spies, US spies, there's action, suspense, and good guys to root for. And the other thing about it is that M.P. Woodward, the author, apparently was a former intelligence officer. And so it kind of maybe lends it a little bit of a verisimilitude, right? Like we'll have it ring true. So I think if you also are waiting for the Daniel Silva, or if you like Dan Fesperman or Olin Steinauer, I think then this would be definitely up your alley. The Handler by M.P. Woodward.
Speaking of writing what you know, my next book is also The Reputation by Sarah Vaughan. Sarah Vaughan is a former lawyer or solicitor, as they say in England, and she writes that part so well. If you are not familiar with Sarah Vaughan, she actually wrote The Anatomy of a Scandal, which was a very popular book from a few years ago, and has been made into a pretty, very popular Netflix series since then. And she's a very meticulous writer, and this novel actually reminded me a lot of another novel that I read a few years ago that was a surprise to me, Miracle Creek. And I really liked that book a lot. But it has the similar kind of courtroom crime drama going on, where you get a lot of different perspectives, and there's some surprises, and the way that the lawyers handle. I mean, this is where her history as a solicitor comes in. The line of questioning is so well done and so well crafted that it just, it turns people's testimony on their heads, and they're always playing to the jury, and it's just really fascinating. I mean, it's one of the reasons that Law and Order is such a cult hit, because people love to be in that courtroom. Never want to be the person in the courtroom, but it's fun to watch anyway. Be a fly on the wall. So this novel takes a little bit of time to stage. There's kind of a lot going on. She's trying to tackle some big issues here. And so first we have the new rising MP, Minister of Parliament, Emma Webster, and she's battling, and while she is simultaneously battling the misogyny that exists in the political sphere, she is also rising on the platform of cybercrime, and specifically what's called revenge porn, which is the non-consensual sharing of recorded sex acts online in revenge. And then we have her daughter Fiona, who is suffering over her mother's commitment to this office and this platform as a rising star in the party. And Fiona's feeling a little bit abandoned, but also, and unbeknownst at first to her mother, Fiona is suffering as a victim of cyberbullying, and retaliates. So, which puts Emma in a very, very difficult position. And a member of the press that Emma thought was on her side and had been collaborating with to kind of generate interest in this platform, attempts to blackmail Emma when he finds out what happened, as they've attempted to cover up whatever Fiona did, and he is going to try and blackmail Emma in order to get a big story. And then the crime ensues. Okay, so this is the crime that's at the heart of the novel. So we haven't even gotten to that yet. No. And then this is told in a chronological order leading up to, before we know about the crime, then we're in the courtroom. So it's going back and forth in time a little bit. But the story is very carefully laid out. And as I said, it's fascinating watching the lawyers battle it out for the judge and the jury's benefit, and people who love procedurals. I mentioned Miracle Creek. Procedurals will really get a lot out of the twist upon twist upon twist upon twist. Like what is really going on here? So and again the unreliable narrator. There's who can you trust? And so it's great. It was a really good book. So.
Oh, okay, that sounds really good. Mm-hmm. I'm adding to my TBR pile again. Okay, my last book is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabel Monaghan. Nora Hamilton's job is romance. She is a screenwriter for the Romance Channel, so she writes sweet and witty romances with happy endings for its viewers. But her latest script is something completely different. It's a darker tale about her failed marriage. And so the Romance Channel didn't want it, but Hollywood thought it would make a really good movie. So when the book opens, Nora is standing on her front porch waiting for the film crew and the actors to show up because they're going to film some things in her tea house, which is in her backyard, which is where she writes. So she meets the crew and the stars, including Leo Vance, who is playing her ex-husband in the movie. And when the film crew wraps and leaves, Leo asks if he can stay. He'll pay her $1,000 a night to stay in her tea house just because he wants to kind of get away from his life for a little while. So she needs the money, so she says, sure. So it's a romance, so their friendship moves into something more. And Nora is surprised because even though she writes romance, she I think thought she was immune from romance herself. And so from there you can guess the usual like romantic twists and turns, which actually kind of fit nicely with Nora's explanation in the book about how she writes a romance script. So that juxtaposition is really good. The real fun of the book, though, I think, is Nora and Leo and her kids and their relationship. Like their dialogue feels very real, their relationship feels very real, and there's a lot of humor and heart in this story. It's definitely a feel-good story. So are there tons of romances out there that sound exactly like this? Yes, there are, yes. However, this particular one is getting starred reviews, and I really enjoyed it. So I would say that if you're going to take a romance for your beach reading, like pick this one. Nora Goes Off Script by Annabel Monaghan.
It reminded a little bit of what you said, not all of it, but a little bit reminded me of that book Evie Drake Starts Over, where there's like an accidental coming together of like an ex-baseball player and a woman who's kind of at a midpoint in her life. And so yeah, and I also realized when I was looking at all of our covers together, we have some very colorful summer covers this time around too.
Yes, this one is one of them.
That one is, yep. My next one is one of them too. It's called Love Marriage by Monica Ali, and it's not really a romance. It's more of I would say it's a great book for book clubs. It's one of those excellent books that attempts to more or less tackle issues of race, class, religion, sex, feminism, familyhood, nationality, culture clashes, coming of age story, realizing who you are and not who everyone else wants you to be, and still manages to construct a meaningful and resonant narrative. So Yasmin is a 26-year-old doctor that seeks nothing but a successful life as defined by her Indian, Muslim, British family. She's doing everything she's supposed to. She's pursuing a medical career. She's getting engaged to a middle-class, wealthy British doctor, planning for kids and still taking care of her parents without much complaint. But others around her agitating, creating rifts that would otherwise be for her and what would otherwise be like a normal transition, normal phase in her life if everyone would just leave her alone. Her brother has a degree in sociology. He's got no direction, no job, and he keeps creating strife in the family. He keeps butting heads with her physician father, who's very, very stubborn, thinks he's just lacking in motivation when really there's actually some other more serious issues going on that the brother is contending with. And he's also, to add to his lot, he's also about to have a baby with his girlfriend. So of course, to Yasmin's family, that just is not acceptable. And also, her mother-in-law, her future mother-in-law, is an academic feminist author, is not only taking over her wedding plans and proving to be a really suffocating presence in, has also twisted her happily domesticated mother into a knot and made a feminist out of her too. And so now she's seeking her own independence. And all of this, I mean, it's really, and she just feels for her father, in that it seems as if he's just been abandoned in this whole situation. He's just trying to make, they have a whole backstory too, the mother and father. They themselves came from different classes in India. So he was a poor village boy. She was from an upper class family, but they fell in love. So this is the title, Love Marriage. It wasn't who she was supposed to marry, but they fell in love and they made a case for themselves, and he rose up and became a very respectable doctor, and so it worked out. But that whole history and the secrets behind that come into play as well. So Yasmin has some questions, and she starts to question whether she's actually happy as well, and whether this is what she always wanted to do. Does she even remember a time when she didn't want to be a doctor, when she didn't want to please her father, when she didn't want to try and create peace in her family or try and keep the peace in her family. So it has a lot of great discussions, as I said, how the secrets of families can boil up and affect the next generation, and of course the unique challenges of immigrants and first-generation children faced when confronted with racist and classist elements of society. Again, it's a great book for book clubs, just so much to discuss here. So, and it's really well written. So
yeah, that sounds really good.
It's very entertaining.
Like of Arsonist City or Joan is Okay, you know, like these like kind of first generation immigrants to this country and or in any country really, right? And the kind of what that does to a family. So
yeah, absolutely. So I think that's everything we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Bye. Happy reading.